Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome, everybody. It feels good to be back. Yes, Tiger Claw Radio returns. Now that the holiday season is behind us, we're able to put a stop to the craziness and get back to our daily routine. And here I am in the Panzer Studios, and I gotta say, it feels good, man. So I tried a couple of times to cut through the craziness and make a return, and didn't quite pull it together. So as a result, I have a couple of old recordings we'll have fun with. But let's start with a track from from BattleTheBits.com. This was the most played track off of the Advent Calendar 2023, approaching Christmas, and it was from Snabbit, and it's Adventure. You're listening to TCR. Let's give it a listen. All right, boys and girls, we're going to shoot it over to a recording that I made from December 14th. And then after that, we've got a piece from Hemrock. Hemrock returns to give us the number one on his top 8 Final Fantasy games of the first 8. All right, let's go there now.
This is Splatter Trigger from YouTube, and you're listening to Tiger Claw Radio.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks a lot.
If you want me to redo it, I don't.
So what have I been up to the past couple weeks? Well, since the last episode of TCR, got a new computer. Let me see. So it was a Black Friday deal that I got a couple of days before Thanksgiving, because online that's where it's not even Black Friday anymore. It's sort of around that time, I guess. All right, so give me a second. Let me see if I can get some specs on this thing. There we go. All right, so the new PC is an AMD Ryzen 7 7700X 8-core processor at 4.5 gigahertz with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm running Windows 11, which which is new to me. But I gotta say, they did so far. It's surprisingly, it's been okay. So far, I can see Windows 11 has adopted a number of things from Linux and other various programs. For example, one of the things I always loved about Linux is it has the multiple desktops that you can switch between. I thought they had added that into Windows 10, and maybe they did in some inconvenient way, but now it's like front and center, like it would be if you were using, say, Linux Mint or something like that. So that's pretty cool. Also, the good old Notepad that we've used forever. It's always been my favorite word processor. They added tabs to it finally, like we've had in Notepad++ for many years. So that's pretty cool too. apart from that, same old, same old. It's. Oh yeah. What about the graphics card? Give me a second. Let me look up exactly what this is. Come on now. I have a nice it's a fancy clear, gamer case because I got a pre-built machine. I didn't want to build one again this time, so it has all the all the annoying lights that are popular on gaming computers right now. Okay, AMD Ryzen 77X 8-core processor. What about the graphics card? This is DX Diag. It should show me. Yeah, here we go. Display. Okay. GeForce RTX 4060 Ti. That's the graphics card. So, long story short, everything should be playable at ultra settings, at least for a little while. Everything that I play will be playable at ultra settings for a little while. It's funny because I don't really do a whole lot that requires modern graphics cards or fancy. Not a lot. I was talking to Swingle about this, and he was giving me some advice. Swingle really knows his hardware. He's like, look, man, if I were getting a new computer, I'd want to make sure I could run everything on ultra for a good while. And I was talking to my wife about it, and she was like, dude, you don't play modern games. For better or for worse, she knows me inside and out. So I went with Swingle's advice for future-proofing's sake, I think. So got a nice machine, and so I decided, since I have the rig, let's try and do some things we couldn't do on the old machine. And I played a couple of more modern games, and the most modern game I think I've been into right now is Rust, which is interesting because that's a 10-year-old game that just had their 10-year anniversary. And I could play Rust on my old machine, but the loading time was so unbearable. It's even now with this machine and with whatever, it's an MMO. You're talking a single game with like 200, 300 people. A lot of nodes in each map. It just takes a while. So now it's a lot faster, but it still takes a few minutes. Whatever. But I've been playing Rust. A lot of base building, brutal PvP action. And tech trees and crafting and researching stuff. And that's been pretty good. Would I recommend Rust to the average player? No, probably not. But one of the things I will say that I love about Rust, this is an MMO, and I never really thought of it as an MMO, but it is. And there's no service charge. You pay the upfront cost for the software package, which admittedly is pretty steep. Right now, it's $40 for Rust if you want to buy it like at a regular price. We got the Christmas sale coming on Steam. But once you drop that money, that's it. And while I was playing, I managed to get in with another player, and that made it way more fun. So he was able to teach me the game a little bit. He's an older guy like myself, so not quite as much frustration as when I talk to younger people. Come on, man! You don't know the entire crafting tree yet? No, sorry. So that's been Rust. It has been fun. It's a frustrating experience. I'm not even talking about the hardware issues. It's a game where you're gonna spend 40 minutes getting things together, and somebody's gonna roll through and just wipe you out. But there are ways to mitigate that, which has been pretty cool. So that's been Rust. Now, apart from Rust. Let me open up my Steam. I've been playing a couple of games. The big one apart from Rust is called it's called Moonring, which is an old school CRPG that came out this past September, and it's free. And I had played it a little bit when it came out. Swingle recommended it to me, but I really dived in hard this past week, and I put in a bunch of hours. Man, oh man, is it a good game. Man, oh man. Ordered the t-shirt, so I have the t-shirt coming. So that way, I was able to put a few dollary dues in the pocket of the dev, even though he offered his game for free. It reminds me, if I were to paint a picture of Moonring, think of the very first Ultima game, in the sense that it's the top-down, tile-based, you're walking around, there's towns you can go into. The only thing it doesn't have from the original Ultima is when you go into dungeons, it's not first-person based, which I think a lot of players are going to like. It's all handcrafted as opposed to being procedurally generated. However, the dungeons do have a little bit of procedural generation. Great game. Great game. Highly recommend Moonring. So after playing Moonring, I went back into my library and I reloaded a game called Caves of Qud. That's Qud, Qud, which is a roguelike. Now, one of the things about Caves of Qud is probably the most active developer I've ever seen. New features every Friday. They have Feature Friday. Do you know what Feature Friday is? That's where they add new features permanently to the game every Friday. And it's an open world roguelike, which makes it excuse me, man. In scope, very, very large game in scope. And the biggest problem I had with Caves of Qud, because this is a game I've had for a while, is you start this game and it was just an avalanche, overflow of options, and then you get and where do I go? What am I doing? Huh? So that is a game that there's a lot. Okay. At its core, it's a simple enough roguelike. You know, you walk around using arrow keys. You can bump back and forth. It's the good old stuff. Excuse me. I played that a little bit. I put in a couple of hours. But that's a much more brutal and unforgiving game than Moonring is. Moonring is a narrative-driven game where there's checkpoints, and you die a lot, but you know every time you die, you go back to the last town you were in. Whereas Caves of Qud is permadeath, at least by default. It's way more procedurally generated and less handcrafted and way more open than Moonring is, and Moonring is already a really open game. So, a couple of similarities. Right now I'm leaning towards Moonring as the better game, and it's free, so those are just some things to check out. So the games I've been playing recently, Moonring and Caves of Qud, Living the Nightmare still gets played. I actually played that just before I got on the air, and Rust. So those four are the big ones. Also, it's been a week or so now, but I reloaded Gary's Mod. My college-defining game is Trouble in Terrorist Town, okay? And that's a multiplayer mode in Gary's Mod. And if you've never played it, if you're not familiar, it's basically a lot like Among Us, but years before Among Us ever came out. But there's no voting people out. You vote people out by shooting each other, the good old-fashioned way. So, excuse me, sorry. I loaded up Gary's Mod like a week ago or so, and I was pleased to find that Trouble in Terrorist Town is still an option. There's still a lot of servers that are populated, and people are playing them and using the microphone and talking, and it was more or less what I remembered it to be, which was a shock. Very, very cool stuff. So that's more or less hey man, what you been playing? As far as news that's going on, Evercade, right? I'm paying close attention to the Evercade market now. I acquired the C64, part 1 and part 2, and they have a third. They just announced volume 3 of the Commodore 64 package on Evercade, which is going to be great. And they did announce the games that are going to be on it. Not a lot that I was familiar with, but I was able to read. Somebody who's more familiar with the C64 library did a complete breakdown. Hang on a second. Let me bring it up here. Yeah, here we go. Without doing like a, game for game list breakdown sort of thing, one particular game, Heavy Metal Paranoid, a shoot 'em up game. Andrew Braybrook's beloved cerebral shoot 'em up comes to Evercade in Heavy Metal Paranoid. It's your job to save the day from hordes of droids gone wild. Woo! Now this particular guy, so this was like one of the best games that touched the Commodore 64. I don't know if that's true, but I'm interested in playing that. As a whole, the library on this cartridge looks shmup driven. I see several shmups, which is great. I see Super Cycle, which looks like an off-road. So I'm sorry, not off-road, like a hang-on kind of game, super hang-on, with the motorcycles and stuff. So there you go. That'll be fun. Now, understandably, the whole Commodore 64 thing, it's not for everybody, but I like that the Evercade sort of branched out a little bit and kind of got into my particular niche, with the understanding that it is, in fact, a niche. And, of course, not everybody who's into the Evercade is going to be into the old computer games the same way I am. Speaking of current events in video gaming, here's something from the Washington Post, which you'll never hear me quote for the most part. This was published 2 days ago. E3, once gaming's biggest expo, is officially dead. Again, things we all already knew. After more than 2 decades of hosting an event that has served as the central showcase for the U.S. and global video game industry, the Entertainment Software Association has decided to bring E3 to a close. Now, while E3 was still going on, this is not from the article, this is me now, I've always kind of thought it was a sort of a flaming turd. Even people who were interested in it were like, okay, let's see what's coming out, but the rest is really cringy. And man, some really weird stuff came out of E3, because every year when it came around, the games were not really what stuck out to me. More like it was more about the weird stuff that the companies did, like the one time that one lady just started spitting blood everywhere because zombies, right? Or that dude that was like playing the flute or something. What? Stop it, video game industry. Put your pants back on. People are watching. I noticed with the, I don't know if this is just the end of the year type holiday sales, but the price of the Retron 76 or 77, whatever it's called, the Atari console, aftermarket Atari console made by Retron, it went down to $60 at one point. And man, oh man, I was so close to just jumping on it, but just got the new PC and that kind of left me penniless, so I had to pass on it. But this is a great time. If you've ever had any interest in Atari, love me some Atari. And speaking of Atari, I mention this, every time we come on the air, but of course we have those high scores that are going on over on the Discord. Hemrock did his 4-game Fiesta thing, and there was sort of a back and forth. I had this idea, since I'm interested in like programming and making carts for the Pico 8. I thought I might like make a demo cart for the Pico 8 that showcases the current high scores of a lot of those games, and who's got what and when it was submitted, and just put it into a Pico 8 program with some music and a couple simple graphics, and then like release it as something that's playable, and that might make it more like an incentive to participate and jump in and be the very best like no one ever was, because then your score would be immortalized in my ridiculous Pico 8 program. So let me know your thoughts. I don't know. I have to pop open Pico 8 and play with it a little bit and see what I can come up with. Apparently, one of the things that's going on with Pico 8 is I haven't updated yet, so I don't know if it's out yet or coming soon, but they're apparently going to revamp the way the music system works in it, so that you can do more with it in terms of chiptunes, because Pico 8 has been like a chiptune format for a long time, but I've always kind of had trouble with it. It has been a lot harder to use than say Famitracker or something like that, but that would be cool if they fixed that up, because I feel like there's a lot of fun stuff we could do with it in terms of chiptunes. But yeah, so that's a thing. All right, boys and girls, this is a bit I've been waiting for a while. Hemrock makes a reemergence to cap off his Final Fantasy list, so let's go there now.
Well, folks, it's time for the top spot. If you've been keeping track, you already know what game lands at the number one position, and it's none other than Final Fantasy V. I know I previously said that the original Final Fantasy was the only one that had beaten more than once. However, in the time it's taken me to make this review, I've actually played through Final Fantasy V again. And I must say it was a very special time as I played the game through with my daughter. She has become fascinated with the Final Fantasy series, and we're now making our way through FF6. In any case, I first played this title on the PS1 Final Fantasy Anthology release. This version doesn't get much love from the fans, but I thought it was great. It's where I first fell in love with the game, and for the record, I don't remember having issues with load times. However, I have heard that the original Black Label release may have trouble playing on a PS2, so it may be worth seeking out a greatest hits version if you intend to play it on the PS2. I used the greatest hits version on a PS2 and still had some occasional glitches. Nevertheless, I never completed this version. I didn't beat the game till I played through the Game Boy Advance rendition, which is not a bad way to experience FF5 as it contains an improved translation and has additional content. The most recent time I beat this title was using the Super Famicom cartridge with my Retron 5, which applied the Pixel Freemaster patch, which is just an amalgamation of a bunch of fixes for the game and certainly a patch I can recommend. Final Fantasy V may be the most underrated Final Fantasy in the series, as it is understood in North America. I think much of this has to do with it not being officially released in the West till nearly 7 years after its original release in Japan. To put it in perspective, Final Fantasy V showed up after Final Fantasy VII in less than a year before Final Fantasy IX. With that said, the game does have an interesting backstory in its preparation to be introduced to Western audiences. It was supposedly translated in English shortly after the December 1992 release in Japan and was slated to come to North America as Final Fantasy III. That obviously didn't happen. According to Ted Woosley, the official English translator of the early Final Fantasy series, there was a concern that Final Fantasy V was not accessible to the typical North American gamer. I'm assuming this is due to the complicated game mechanics, especially the job system. After Square halted the initial release of Final Fantasy V to North America in the early 90s, there was a rumor that the game would be rebranded as a spin off entitled Final Fantasy Extreme. That didn't happen. Yet a third attempt was made by Top Dog Software that tried to port the game to the PC, and then a similar attempt by Eidos Interactive in the late 90s. Neither of these developers brought the fifth game in the series to market. As is often the case with video games, when companies fail, the fans take up the charge. So, in October of 1998, a fan translation of the Super Famicom version was unofficially released to the public. Final Fantasy Anthology, which included FF5 and FF6, followed a year later for the PSX and functions as its first official release to North America. There are four major reasons why I'm crowning FF5 as the king of the first 8 Final Fantasies. The first reason is entirely sentimental, and that's something I mentioned before. I played this game with my daughter, and that's a memory that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. She's seen me play other FF titles, but she never sat down and engaged the vast majority of the game like she did with Final Fantasy V. She, on more than one occasion, was the driving factor to get me to stop what I was doing and pick up the cartridge for another play session. If it wasn't for her, I may not have completed the game as quickly as I had. The second reason is that I adore the job system, which received a massive upgrade from Final Fantasy III. I'm not going to give a deep dive into this incredible game mechanic, but it's summed up in experimentation and exploration. The fact that we have a website devoted to the 4-job Fiesta experience is a testament to the balance of this system. The third reason is the pixel art aesthetic. I think this game is only bested by Final Fantasy VI in this category. Even still, the look of the game holds up today and gives me that quintessential 16-bit feel. Moreover, there are different sprites for each job class. Plus, these sprites change with each characters. It's amazing the amount of detailed emotion that can be expressed in such a limited graphical system. The fourth reason is the soundtrack. Although Terra's theme is my favorite FF tune, the opening theme of Final Fantasy V would be my second. Although it may not be the best OST in Final Fantasy history, it was arguably the best in the series when it was released, only to be surpassed by subsequent titles. In summary, Final Fantasy V is the pinnacle of the early Final Fantasy games, albeit closely followed by Final Fantasy VI. And as I prepared for this ranking, I asked myself, which of these 8 games do I want to go back and play again? The first title in line to answer that question was Final Fantasy V. And believe it or not, I completed it before I even got to the number 1 in this series as I was recording these reviews. The creativity and flexibility from the job system in a classic medieval FF setting with marvelous 2D artwork and a moving score is a winning combination for the best early Final Fantasy game, and perhaps one of the best Final Fantasy games ever made. With that, I'm signing off. Take care and keep rolling retro.
So there you have it, boys and girls. Big thanks to Hemrock for putting those together. The last time he appeared on the show with one of these, it got me big into Final Fantasy, and never did quite beat Kefka, but the experience of one-shotting the Ghost Train was a wonderful experience that I would not have come across had it not been for these segments. So big thanks to Hemrock for those. All right, I got some more stuff to go over, but I thought I would dig back into the archives, and I pulled out a track called My Haunted Ass from Venom, Venomn. And let's see, let me right-click and see how old this file is. This would have been one from chipmusic.org or whatever, one of the non-Battle of the Bit sites that are unfortunately not as populated these days. This looks like it was from 2021, so a couple years now. Let's give it a listen. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. So on the tail end of the Steam sales, I was able to pick up a couple of games, which I didn't think was going to happen because I bought the new computer and that kind of drained everything. But I, managed to get a couple of things. Let's see. I picked up Zombie Army 4 for $6.50, which I was really stoked over because That game's usually really expensive, and it only ever really goes on sale down to like 15 or 20. So I thought that was a steal. And the way I got it for that cheap was they sold it in a bundle along with the Left 4 Dead games. And because I had all those already, it was like, hey, complete the bundle for $6.50. Sure enough. Played that for a couple hours this morning. Great game. I loved Zombie Army Trilogy. The Zombie Army Trilogy was definitely a mod, right? Some like that they had made like a commercial mod for a pre-existing game, whereas Zombie Army 4, it's much more of a completed independent game. Has a lot more polish that was missing in Zombie Army Trilogy. And I'm about 5 hours in, which is kind of a shock. And that's been great. Apart from that, I picked up a Need for Speed bundle of a bunch of modern Need for Speed games, which I don't typically play. But I gave Need for Speed Heat a try, and I don't know why I picked that game. And I gotta say, I like the mechanics of driving the car. I like the races. I like exploring the city. The only thing I don't like is the whole Fast and the Furious aesthetic that the Need for Speed games seem to, at least this one, seems to have adopted. That is really irritating. So I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it. But again, new computer, right? These are games that look really good and play really good. So that's been really cool. Only about, Steam says I'm 48 minutes into that one, so not much I can say apart from vroom vroom. I think independently, what are they charging for this thing? Yeah, independently right now on sale, it's $3.50, which I would say seems to absolutely be worth that. That I've been enjoying it for $3.50. It's funny because the Need for Speed games, I think, are the first games I encountered in the wild that crossed over the threshold of a $70 base game, which is like a line in the sand for me. $60 is already a line in the sand for me, but $70 base game, no, I check out there. So the first game I ever saw to cross that threshold was Need for Speed Unbound, which came out right at this time last year, and I was pissed. I was like, I can't believe the gaming industry is trying to do that. And sure enough, Need for Speed Unbound was in that package with like 5 other games. So that's pretty hilarious. The whole $70 thing, it has since become a reality. I mean, we see it. It's not, not every game, but a good number of them will cross into $70. Like if you want to get the Call of Duties and whatnot before they come out, or when they first come out, instead of waiting for a year or so like I do. And that was just standard practice anyway, but those early adopters, they're getting fleeced even harder now than they ever have been before. And it's funny because fans of those series are like, hey man, it's inflation. That's just what the dollar is now. It's like, really? You're okay with this? All right. I don't know. I guess whatever. So, so speaking of very expensive games, I also spent some time this morning playing Angband, which remains an amazing, amazing game. If you've never played Angband, it's a traditional roguelike. It's been, in development for 30 years, still being developed, free. I try and keep the updated version available on the Discord for you to download. But it had been a while since I actually sat down with it. And the last time I remember playing it, one of my gripes was I didn't know how to sell items. Right? You've got a little town on top, and you got a dungeon below. You get the items, you bring them back up, and you should be able to sell them. And it turns out you can. I'm just very, very dumb. They have the rule instituted where items can only be sold to their appropriate stores, right? So if you find a knife, it has to be sold at the weapons store. If you find, a pair of boots, it has to be sold to the armor store, and so on and so forth. But figuring that out, opened up the game a little bit. The last stint I had, I think, with traditional roguelikes was with a game called Addom, A-D-O-M. Also a very, very good game. The problem with Addom was that it was too punishing, so that it had this introduction, right, that took like 10 or 15 minutes, and then, I would always die, which is, that's rogue. That's traditional roguelikes, you die. But I got tired of playing that introduction. I hated it. So, Angband is a good solution for that. And I very much enjoyed it. So that's how it goes. You buy buy games from the sales, and you end up playing the free game. So, yeah, there it is. Apart from that, I also picked up a couple of Commodore 64 games over on itch.io. You might remember before we went on hiatus for the holidays, I was really into the Evercade, and I still am. My favorite Evercade cartridges are the Commodore 64 cartridges, C64 1 and 2, as well as the Homebrew Home Computer Heroes cartridge. Those 3 cartridges are probably some of the lowest rated amongst my fellow Evercade fans, but I really enjoy them because they got me back into the Commodore 64. Those cartridges, they introduced me it's not just that the Commodore 64, is a pain to configure, and playing a curated collection takes care of that. That's a big thing. But also it introduces, like, the Commodore 64 library is so massive. It's nice to have like a tour guide, right? I already forget the name of the roguelike that I've been playing on Evercade. I think it was Sword of Farog or something, or Temple of Asphi. I think Temple of Asphi was a different one, but there's a couple of like traditional Dungeons and Dragons type games that I really, really liked. So, going from there, the next logical step for me was to dive back into the POW Kitty V90. And the reason for that jump is because the POW Kitty V90 remains my favorite way to experience Commodore 64 games directly from the C64 library. That meaning like not from a collection. Okay? So you go to itch.io. There's newly developed C64 games. You get them. I like to bring them back to the POW Kitty V90. And the reason that's my favorite is because portable, because good controller, and because very, very good on-screen keyboard. A lot of these old computers, when they get emulated, there's a button you can press to bring out a virtual keyboard. You can press a few keys. That same handheld has an emulator for Amiga, which I'm still trying to get to work, and one for DOS. And they both have their virtual keyboards, and they're not as good as the C64 one. I like the C64 one because it takes up 1/3 of the screen instead of half, making it very tiny. And it's just adorable. I really enjoy it. So, yeah, got me some C64 games. I'm loading them up on the POW Kitty this afternoon, and that'll be some of my chill time for this upcoming week. I'll keep the discussion of this limited here on the air, but I also went back to Pico 8 this past week or so ago, and you might be familiar with the program that I made. I made a Pico 8 program, for solo role-playing. Basically, it's just started out as a dice roller. You press a button and it would roll, 10 different types of dice. And then I added a lot of, like, tables. If you ever try and play Dungeons and Dragons with an emulated DM, usually the way they do it is there's a large list of tables, a lot of them. So you got to roll for what happens next, roll for what the person says, roll for what your next quest is. And the tables that they've come up with are fascinating. What can be done with a few, RNGs, right? If you think about it, it's the same way video games work. It's you play the original Rogue on DOS. It's just RNG. How big is the next room? How many rooms are there? What direction? Monsters, whatever. So the downfall of that is that it can be incredibly cumbersome looking up, table after table after table. So this little program was, let's consolidate some of that on a little program. You can just press a button and it's going to tell you what happens next. So it toes the line. It's not really a video game. It's more like a role-playing tool. And I discovered this past week a little something about Pico 8 programming. So I made this entire tool using if-then logic, which, by the book, functions just fine. However, Pico 8 in particular has a limitation where you can only have a certain amount of tokens. Tokens meaning operators in your code. So if you think about it, if this, then this, that's 4 tokens, right? So if you've got a table of 30 different options in your if-then logic, that's what, 120 tokens for that table. Well, what I figured out was, instead of using if-then logic, I can create a table and then do a simple like lookup tool. So instead of 30 or 120 tokens, that's reduced down to like, I don't know, 10. So I went through all my old code and I ripped out all the if-then logic and I used these tables in their places, and I was able to shrink down the code. It was previously like 60% of the allotment was used, and now it's like 30% of the allotment is used. It's incredible. So that got me to open that back up and work on it more. There's nothing front-facing different yet, except that the code is way more concise and clean, and I'm working on adding things to it, which I'm proud of. I'm proud of this thing, man. People, this is the one thing that I've used outside of TCR that I've made where like people actually surf in and use this from time to time, and I've gotten some feedback on it and stuff. You know, it's just a simple dice roller, but it's a pretty cool thing. This is Pico 8 doing what it's supposed to do, because I learned something valuable about how Lua programming handles tables of data, which is really cool. So there you go. I just popped open YouTube to try and find comments, and they got me every single time I go to YouTube to try and find the comments. They get me. Hey, buddy, wouldn't you like to watch this dog eating a horse? Okay, I'm in. So here I am. I don't know how long that took, but we've been off the air for a good bit. I disappeared for the holidays, which is kind of a drag, but it let me, spend some time with the folks, with the kids and whatnot. So there's a good amount of comments over on YouTube, but I don't think anything directly replying to TCR. Now, one of the things that happened was that we had the Steam year in review. And Death Adder says, I just clicked on my year of not touching grass results. Maybe I'll make a video about it as well. Apparently I played 50 games this year. What the H? I must have sampled a bunch of free games or something. Of course, 51% of the playtime went to Dead by Daylight. Man, what a depressing feature. Thanks, Steam. I gotta agree, man. I don't know how positive I felt looking at my Steam year in review. It was like, I mean, I guess it's accurate. That I've said all along, the reason I use Steam is because of the data, right? It keeps track of your playtime, and then you can look at a report based on that playtime for the past 2 weeks. It's a feature that's been part of Steam since I started on it 12 or 13 years ago, and it's one of the reasons why I play games within its ecosystem rather than outside of it when I'm on the PC for the most part. Even Angband, which is a free game, I'm like, is anybody going to end up selling a variant of this on Steam so I can have it on Steam? But yeah, so here's textbook wise, this should be something I'm really into, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, if you had a play clock back in the boom days of World of Warcraft, there's a lot of people who would not be happy about it, but whatever. It's a fun thing. I'm glad it exists. I just personally didn't get much satisfaction out of it. And dropping back in the comments, there's a couple random fiddle paddle about the Evercade Super Pocket. Somebody says Cathedral is broken. Unfortunately, we have to somehow update the system to fix it. Okay. Never bought Cathedral for the Super Pockets. People really seem to be divided on that system. A good number of people are complaining about not being able to rebind controls. I don't know. That seems like a weird complaint to me. No, I can't think of a console that ever lets you like rebind the native controls. Like, imagine playing on a PlayStation, like an old school PlayStation, and having the ability to swap circle and X natively. I just didn't expect that to be a thing, so I didn't miss it. However, I do hear that complaint coming primarily from the side of people who bought the Capcom handheld, the Capcom Evercade, and I did not, because I knew this thing. is not for fighting games. It just isn't. So that might be why. I don't know. So yeah, there you go. Haven't done much with Evercade in the past week. Not since moving to Powkitty for my Commodore 64 fix. Oh yeah, okay. I just jumped over to Discord to see if there's anything sitting on Discord waiting to be addressed. And can we talk about the Epic free games for a minute? If you're not familiar, I have a bot set up on my Discord where every time Epic Games changes their free game that they're giving away, it posts a little something. Here's a link where you can go get it. Here's a picture of the game. Here's what it normally costs, and here's how much longer you have to get it. It's great. It's a great little bot. I wish every Discord had it. But anyway, around Christmas time, they start doing those games rapid fire, right? They do a new game every day, and as of 3 days ago, they did Saints Row. I mean, the reboot of Saints Row that came out 1 year ago as an Epic exclusive, they gave away for free. And that is hilarious to me. Because this is a game that's credited with shutting down Volition, because it was not just that it was so bad, but they were so unapologetic about having a huge middle finger for the fans of this franchise. So it's a good example of a franchise being against and having an adversarial relationship with their fans, and how that turns out. So that was hilarious. I saw it on Steam drop down to $13, and I considered it, man, because I love Saints Row, and I wanted to round out my collection and give it a try, but I just decided, no, man, I can't. And then it came out for free, so I have it on the Epic Game Store. Now, I still, as of right now, I haven't loaded Epic onto the new computer, and I wasn't planning on doing it. Now I'm considering it. I was going to say I've never played an Epic game, but that's not necessarily true, because early on in the life cycle of getting free games from the Epic Game Store, I got that game Fez, and that was a game I never wanted to spend money on just because I didn't like Phil Fish and his attitude towards the rest of the industry. So that game went for free in the Epic Game Store like years ago, and I picked it up. And I remember loading it up and giving it a try for a few minutes. But it was one of those instances where I really only had 5 minutes to play. So I didn't have time to play the game, but I tried anyway. And that was my one experience playing games from the Epic Game Store. I had on my wish list for the Epic Game Store for years, I wanted Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, because for a very long time, that was the only place you could get it. That game had disappeared from everywhere. I used to have it on the PlayStation 3. It used to be on the Xbox. It was like all over the place. And then everybody pulled it, and it was gone. And showed up on Epic is the only place you could get it for $15 for years. Finally, that showed up on Steam, and now I have it on Steam. So I've never bought a game off of Epic. I even bought a game off of Origin a couple of times, but not Epic. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm on the fence on whether or not I want to install it. Now that I have a computer system that can handle multiple storefronts, I'll probably go back to GOG.com before I load up Epic. But I don't know. We'll see. So that's it for TCR. The last things on the Discord server was Hemrock and I going back and forth about No Buy November, and that was on the 7th. So that would have been. I'm pretty sure that's stuff that's been covered already. So that said, I hope you guys had an awesome Christmas and an awesome New Year. I'm super glad to be back. To be perfectly honest, super glad to return to normal. So whatever it is you're doing, I hope you're doing the best you can. Hanging in there. Keep surviving. I'll see you next week.